All right, I'm so happy to be here, and it's a wonderful day here in Texas in terms of the weather, and I'm really excited about being able to share this material with you. It's the um, the very first time it's been presented, and in fact, I just compiled this data last night, so you're getting the very first cut of it. I'm Dr. Rick Hoefer. I'm the director of Speak. SPEAK stands for Social Policy Education, Advocacy, and Knowledge. It's a program at the University of Texas at Arlington that is supported by the Simmons Sisters Fund at Texas Women's Foundation. So they have given us a very generous gift to create Speak, and this is one of the first things that we're able to share about the data and the project that we've created. So thank you very much for being here, um, and I'm really excited. This is great stuff. All right, now we advance. It's always an issue to learn a new platform, and I'm sorry I'm learning it in front of you. Let's see. Do you have an idea how one advances in this platform? Because
You
it's
mean you want to play the next
oh,
slide? Yeah,
yeah.
just click on it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
All
there.
right. Super. Okay, well, I'm speaking to the choir here, or preaching to the choir here, by saying that social workers should be engaged in politics. And I have to say, every time I hear Shannon Lane talk, and she is so awesome, she's so dynamic, and I'm proud to be on the same program with her. And she may not talk much about how good her books are, but they're very good. So I hope that you support her in that way by reading her material. But of course, one thing that she says, and that all of us engaged in this work say, is that social workers should be engaged in politics. It's in the NASW Code of Ethics, it's in CSWE guidelines, and it's definitely a part of democratic theory. If we're going to make changes in the United States, there are many things that we must do, but one of them is be engaged in politics, including voting. So, as I know you know, we have lots and lots and lots of voting rights issues going on across all of the 50 states. So, um, again, I'm just adding my voice to the many other people who are telling you that social workers and social work students should be engaged in politics. So we hear that all the time. And one of the articles that I've written in the past says, do social workers live up to the code of ethics that NASW has? Well, there's good news. And the good news is that social workers actually are involved in politics. We're involved in politics to a greater extent than other professions. We're involved more than the general public. So there's a lot that we have going for us. For example, the reasons that we do these things is that, well, we vote more often than other groups because we're told that it's an important thing. We know how to register. We know how to keep up with the shifting policy. We also receive advocacy training in our degree programs. If you're a student, you probably have learned in your social policy class or other classes about how important it is to be an advocate and the kind of things you can actually do, such as writing to your representatives or voting, of course, and many other things. So, not every professional program teaches their students how to do this. So, this is an advantage that we as social workers have. We also, because we frequently work in the trenches or we work on the front lines of social problems, we understand the impact and the importance of policy on our work. If many other professions or degree programs don't have that connection with the real world in the way that social work does. So these are some of the reasons why we are very good and why we tend to be more involved than other folks are. And we also get to attend great events like this one, CRISP's Student Advocacy Day. And I'm so glad you're here and so many others. In Texas, the NASW chapter has a Student Advocacy Day every, well, they've actually turned it into Social Work Advocacy Day. And people, social workers, and students from across the state go to Austin and inundate the Capitol and the offices there with social work ideas and values. So these are ways that social workers are like really good role models for other professions. Now, I told you I'm the director of SPEAK, and SPEAK is social policy, education, advocacy, and knowledge. Among other things that we do, we conducted a survey because we wanted to understand better what social work students understand about advocacy and being involved with the civic world. So these are some of the results. And this presentation looks at which activities are done. There's lots and lots of activities that one can do, and it would be really hard to do all of them, but some are really important. So we conducted this survey to learn what students across the U.S. are actually engaged in. You know, it's not just what they would like to do or what they might do in the future, but really we ask, what are you doing now? So I'm going to talk to you about some of these things. And there's something called the civic volunteerism model. And we're going to test whether this actually predicts who will be more active than other students. The civic volunteerism model talks about what are the prerequisites for people to be involved. And we'll get to that a little bit more, the details. But this presentation is going to look not just at what are the activities that are done, but also the ones that are not done. And importantly, we're going to look at why they're not done and what we can do as social work educators and practitioners in order to increase the number of people that do those activities. The basic underlying premise of this presentation is that if we don't know why people aren't doing things, then we can't help them learn how to do it. So we're targeting specific interventions or ways to increase civic engagement, but we can only do that if we know why they're not currently doing it. So that's really, if you're a social work student, maybe this will resonate with you. If you're a social work educator, perhaps you'll be able to include this information into your own classwork or in the work of the entire social work program that you're working in. So our SPEAK student data says that we have some really interesting findings. Again, we're going to start off with what are things that social work students at UTA and across the country actually do. Well, 80% of the students in the survey said that they often or always vote. So that's really high. The typical American national election, the percent of people voting who are eligible is somewhere between 50 and 60%. It's very rare that we get more than 60% of the eligible population to vote. So this is something that is outstanding about social work students. In addition, this 80% often or always encourages others to vote. So it's not just that we vote, but it's that we tell other people how they can vote. We encourage them to vote. We tell them why it's important. There's a lot of misinformation that has been spread in the last election or national election or so about how voting fraud is rampant and things like that, none of which has been proven. And in fact has been disproven many, many times, yet there's a lot of people who still believe that. So it's important that not only do we vote ourselves, but that we encourage others to vote. Now, this is something that was surprising to me. 59% of the students in the survey said that they often or always know who represents them in Congress. Now, this is, to me, a fairly low number. It's like, who's your member of Congress? You obviously can't contact them if you don't know who they are. So this is one that I would like to see increased among others. And the same thing is true at the state level. Again, you can't advocate to people that you don't know who they are. So although this is probably higher than the general population, it's certainly not what we would consider ideal. 59% was a popular number of people who to do this. 59% often or always read, listen to, or watch the news. So this, again, was a little bit of a surprise on the low side, but I think because we're dealing with students, oftentimes they don't think of reading, watching, or listening to the news in quite the same way that people in previous generations have. I think there's a lot more connection through social media, and so this may not be capturing everything quite right. And the last thing that I'm going to show here is that almost half, 49%, often or always discuss current policy issues with others. Now, I think that this may happen in your social work classes, especially a policy class or other classes. So this was a little bit on the low side compared to what I was expecting, but nonetheless, it's probably very high compared to other population groups. So this is what students do, 50% basically or more, often or always do these things. But, and this is the flip side, students are not active in many other ways. So this is the flip side. What is it that students aren't doing that they could be doing? For example, the percentage of students who never or rarely do some of the behaviors. That first set of numbers was always or often, and this set is never or rarely. So what percentage of our students never or rarely testify at federal, state, or local hearings? Well, 90%. So that means that almost nobody, none of the students in the survey have testified. This is such a powerful way to get our information across, but it's not being done very much. Also, 90% of the students don't organize political rallies or protests. 78% don't attend public hearings, or they never or rarely do that. Now, those things all seem very time consuming, so you can sort of understand that. But contact my legislators. 60% of the students in the survey never or rarely did that. This seems to, well, of course, if you don't know who they are, you're not going to contact them. But it's very important that we like write letters to them, we make phone calls and things like that. So there's a lot to gain here. I think I'll hold the questions until later, but public hearings frequently are now streamed live. And so it's not like you have to go to City Hall or to the state capitol or Congress. Nowadays, it's a lot easier. So I think this is maybe something that we educators are not letting students know. But thanks for that question about where we should go to see public hearings. They're normally streaming. Like I can go to my city, my city's website, and they will have city council hearings online. The next thing that over half of the people never or rarely do is to voice their opinions to media outlets. Now, I think that this could be, like we used to talk about writing a letter to the editor, and that's certainly still possible. But obviously, people don't read the newspaper, like, hold it in their hand and read it. But you can still write letters. You can still do that kind of communication but 54% of the students never or rarely do that. Half of the students in the survey did not ever actively campaign for candidates. Now, again, this is kind of a issue where it would seemingly take a lot of time. But if you're not helping get the right people elected, then obviously it's going to be harder to advocate for them. And so it's important to get involved in campaigns. The other thing is, and I can say this from personal experience, campaigning for the candidate that you believe in is actually fun. I mean, you meet people who agree with you, and you learn a lot about each other. And if you may not remember this, but just a few years ago, Bernie Sanders was running for president, and he had so many young people that were supporting him. There was most of those people's first experience, and they were very, very active in the campaign. But let's just say that you're an educator or someone else who wanted to increase the percent of students who did these things. How would you do that? I mean, it seems very difficult because people are busy and people, they may not want to do it. But it makes a difference. And this is the key thing that I'm adding to the discussion today is how can you know what's keeping them from doing it if you don't know that? So I believe it makes a difference why students don't engage. And so that we as educators or we as people who are supporting advocacy, we have to understand the mindset of the people that we're encouraging. Now, you all are here, and so you're obviously wanting to be involved, but there's a lot of people back in your programs or back home, wherever you live, who aren't as engaged. And so how would you get them engaged? All right. So this is the key thing. Depending on what the reason is that people aren't involved, then I believe that we have to approach them differently. The same approach to increasing involvement isn't going to be workable for each person because they have different issues about why they're not involved. So let's get into that data. According to the civic volunteerism model, which I briefly mentioned before, people never or rarely get involved because of three reasons. The first one is they say they don't have time. I know you as a student are very busy and you've got your classes, you may be working one or more jobs, you may have a family, or you may have other people in your life who need your time and attention. During this pandemic, we have had all sorts of time constraints where people tend to be working harder and longer from home than they would if they had to go into an office. So this is something that the model says people don't get involved because they don't have time. Another reason that they don't get involved is because they just don't know where to begin. For example, if the question that we had earlier, like, where do I go to watch a public hearing? Well, that's someone who doesn't necessarily know where to begin. It's a great question. And there's so many things that are like that. Where do you go to get registered to vote? How do you do that? How do you get involved in a campaign? These are things that aren't just written down somewhere that you can go check all the time. The third reason that people don't do things is because they don't feel comfortable. It can be very hard starting a new activity. The last election here, even in my own town, I was looking for the offices of the Democratic Party because I was going to volunteer to help in a campaign. It took me forever to find that office because it was in the back of a little strip mall. It wasn't very big. It wasn't well lighted. It didn't have a big sign out front saying Democratic National or Democratic Committee headquarters or whatever. So if you have to walk into a situation like that, you might not feel comfortable and you might say, forget it. I'm going to turn around before I even get in that door. Many people just like aren't that comfortable. They're not that gregarious. They're more uh, wanting to hang back. And so there's a lot of reasons why people might not feel comfortable to engage in some of these things. But you can see that each of these reasons might lead to different approach to how you're going to convince someone to go ahead and get involved. And that's what the rest of this presentation is about. Okay. So suppose that you wanted to convince someone or to help someone become more involved. Someone who says, I don't know where to start. Well, some of the ideas that I have for this are that as an instructor or as a student, if you don't know where to start, there's at least three things you can do. And these are the ones I'm going to talk about. You can talk with an expert. Now, when I say an expert, that's kind of a misleading. That's like a big name thing, right? Who's an expert? I don't know any experts. But there's a saying I have that I use with students all the time, and that is, to a kindergartner, a third grader is an expert. A third grader doesn't necessarily know as much as a sixth grader, it doesn't know as much as the adults, but that person, in, because of differences in experience and age, can be the expert that is needed to take you from not knowing anything to knowing enough to get involved. So I should put quotation marks around expert. An expert in this case is anyone who knows more than you do and is willing to share it. So if someone says, I don't know where to start, it's quite easy to say, well, here's someone we can talk to. And indeed, it might be your professor or it might be a person that you're familiar with who is actually already doing this. Another way to learn, someone who doesn't know where to start, is to Google it, of course, or look at a YouTube video. There's so many things that I know how to do because I did those two things. So I don't know how to get, I don't know how to register to vote. Well, let's find that out. And as a class project, you could even create an explainer video for your classmates. If everyone in a class, either individually or in a group, got together and picked different topics to do videos on, then your school and certainly your class would have a set of videos that could answer almost any question that your classmates would have. So if someone says, I don't know where to start on this, these are some approaches that can be taken. And so here are some behaviors, civic engagement behaviors that where over a third of the people said they don't know where to start. I know my federal representatives. Okay, people who don't know that and said I don't know where to start. Well, this would be a fairly easy thing to do, right? Because you could Google it, you could find a YouTube, and once that information is there are websites that are out there, and that all you have to do is type in your address, and it tells you who your representatives are at the federal level. So a little explainer video about that could go a long way to overcoming this not knowing where to start. Similarly, following legislation, there are websites there. There's techniques and tips and tricks. And I think talking to an expert in this area would be a great way to learn how to do that. Same with knowing your state representative or knowing how to track how your legislators vote. Obviously, contacting your legislators, you have to know who they are, but knowing how to send them an email, this is something that we can teach. It's not going to take very long even. And once people have the knowledge, then they're more likely to do it. The final thing that's here in red is to testify at federal, state, or local hearings. It's pretty understandable that quite a number of people don't know where to start. You have to know where the hearing is, if there's going to even be a hearing, what the topic is, things like this. So again, we can talk to experts. We can go to websites of the legislative body, the city council, and so on. And it would be great if we had an explainer video that we could pass on from one class section to another. So these are just some examples of, if the answer is don't know where to start, then we could use these three approaches: talking with an expert, finding the information online, and then creating a video for your classmates. All right, so then the second kind of um, reason that people weren't being involved is that they said, I don't have time. And again, I think we all can resonate with this. Everyone's life is busy, and it's even busier if you're taking on the added duties of being a student. So for in this case, we can like give people more time, in essence, not make it be something separate, but we can make it part of a class assignment. All right, write a letter to your representative as a class assignment. Then it just gets folded into your student work, and it's not extra. I think what people mean when they say I don't have time is that, like, I already have so many responsibilities. So if we can fold the activity into already existing responsibility, it all of a sudden gives them time to do that. Same thing is true as if educators make this as a group project. I know group projects get a very bad reputation, but when they're done well and they're meaningful, then and it's part of a class project, then it gets done. For example, if you had to create a testimony to a legislative committee all on your own, that would definitely seem overwhelming. But if you do it as a group project and you have an instructor who's guiding you and leading you and giving you feedback, then it becomes much less of a overwhelming idea. And therefore, in this case, we have given you more time, and now you can check off that you're doing this. And then the third way, which is kind of at an individual level, is to provide time management training. The students that I work with at the University of Texas at Arlington with Speak, we have a time management training. And it's really not so much about, how to schedule things. It's how to prioritize things so that you're doing the things that are most important to you. And the person in this video series says, he calls it essentialism. What is it that's essential for me to do right now in order to achieve what I want to do? So in that sense, if you're able to focus on the things that are essential and drop off the things that aren't, then again, it's like you have more time to do the important things. Okay. So this is the second reason people don't do things. And here are some of the behaviors that they don't do because they don't have enough time. The first one is attend public hearings. Well, now some of these may overlap, right? Don't know where to start is also up there with 34%, but not enough time is cited by 64% of the respondents for why they don't do this. So once you know where they are, that you can stream them live or they're recorded, you still may not feel like you have enough time to do this. Follow legislation is the same thing. That can seem very overwhelming and time consuming. Organizing political rallies or protests. Yeah, that certainly is going to take a lot of time. I bet you could talk to the people who are organizing the social work day, advocacy day, and they have put in hours and hours upon hours. And the last one here is to track how legislators vote. It's certainly, if you're doing this just on your own because you want to, it can be very time consuming. But let's say this has become a class assignment. You're in a social policy class, and one of the things that the teacher says is, well, we're going to track this legislation that's been introduced. If you do it as a group project, it takes very little time for any one individual person. So again, it's how can we expand the amount of work, the civic engagement activities, without actually making this be a lot more consuming of your time. All right, now we're moving on to the third approach for the students who say, I don't feel comfortable. So how do you help someone feel comfortable in any situation when it's a new behavior? Well, one thing you do is you teach it and practice it in small steps. And it's like anything that's new, it's going to seem overwhelming until you can break it down into smaller steps and just do one thing and then another thing and then another thing. That way, at the end, you're comfortable. And in some ways, it's a desensitization. If people with phobias oftentimes are able to overcome those phobias because they approach the situation that makes them nervous and gives them problems, then they learn to deal with it and they overcome that phobia. So again, that's one way to do something. If you want students who are not feeling comfortable with the behavior to do it. Again, here you can do it as a group project, which when you have friends doing something or you have people that you like doing something as a group project, then it gets to be a lot more fun. Like, just take the idea of a Habitat for Humanity home. I don't know how to build a house. I know very, very little about how to do that. But if I joined with other people in a Habitat for Humanity project, I'm going to learn. I'm going to be around people who can teach me things. And by the time it's over, I'm going to feel much more comfortable. And then the third way for people who aren't feeling comfortable, the third approach is to talk about and think about your values. I really think this is important. How about in Texas and other places, we're having attacks on trans people, trans people, and they're being victimized. Young children in Texas their parents are being told, if you support them in the transition, then you're doing child abuse. I don't know about you, but this just makes my blood run cold. It's just so wrong. So no matter how uncomfortable I feel about writing a letter to Greg Abbott, who's the governor, or going to a protest, no matter how uncomfortable I might feel about that, by focusing on what I think is really important, which is treating everyone well and as a real person, not trying to erase them like the governor's doing. Anyway, if I think about my value structure, that it's going to make me a lot more uncomfortable to not do something than it is to do it. So the more I think about the values and how important it is, then I overcome any feeling of, oh, I don't want to do that. That makes me nervous. So these are three approaches. And there's only two of these behaviors that show up in the survey as being very high. But one is voicing my opinions to media outlets. I think people sometimes fear that their words will be used against them. And so they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to stick out. And I know in Texas, there's so many Republicans, and particularly in rural areas, it can be very uncomfortable being the lone liberal, for example. And I suppose the other way is true as well. If you're the lone conservative in a social work class, you might feel less likely to want to express your opinion. But it's part of our legacy and our responsibilities as social workers. The other thing is campaigning for candidates. And I talked about that a little bit earlier, about how it can actually be fun, and you can start and do things in small steps. I don't know how many balloons I've tied off with helium, but it's certainly an important part of a candidate. And there's a couple more things here. Testifying at federal, state, or local hearings or contacting legislators. More than 30% of the people don't feel comfortable about that. So there we have it. Again, start small, take small steps, do a group project, work with other people who are like minded, and connect with your own values. So one of the things that I'm going to shift gears a little bit here. I'm looking quickly at the chat, and there's oh yeah, there Altaf Hussein has given us a website that we can look at, and there's another comment here that frequently we feel like everything, and not just feel, but frequently things are used against us in other contexts. So you do have to be somewhat careful, I have to say, and but I don't think we have to be as careful as we think we do. And again, if you work with other people and you do small steps, then you can become more comfortable, um, and make more of an impact. Okay, so now shifting gears. Thank you all for the comments; those are really, really helpful. So if we look at all of the behaviors that are part of the civic engagement model, testifying and helping organize political rallies, attending hearings, contacting legislators, all of these, one of the things is we have to kind of consider we all have limited time. So if we as educators or we as students want to increase the numbers of people doing these things, we should probably just focus on a few of them. So which of these would be the most important? Is it more important to testify at federal, state, or local hearings, or to contact legislators? Well, I think for most people, most of us can contact our legislators a lot more easily if we only knew how to do that. That's a fairly low stakes encounter. I call up my U.S. Senator's office frequently. My senator, one of them is Ted Cruz. I give his staff member a little bit of my opinion. They don't do anything with it, but I feel like I've made my voice loud enough for he has to at least understand that not everyone agrees with him. So to me, that's a really high priority. So if I am in charge of a class and I want to increase this from 38% of the people have never done this or rarely do this, then I'm going to make that an assignment. And once you do it once, it gets easier every single time. So I think as people looking to increase other people's engagement, well, first, like we have to walk our own walk. We have to, we can't just talk about this and not do it. We have to do it ourselves. So how are you going to make yourself be more engaged along these activities? That's part of what this day at the advocacy, this advocacy day is about. So if you want to have this happen in your school, you can approach your teachers or your instructors and say, look, I think I just heard this wonderful presentation, and I think we should all contact our legislators because it's an easy thing to do, and it once we do it once, we'll do it more and more, and so therefore it's a very easy entry point. So if you take a look at all of these different options, you could go back to your instructors and say, how can we do this? Which of these are most important? Which can we do? Let's have everyone know their federal representative. That's pretty easy. Their state representative. Follow legislation is a little more time consuming, but still it's not that hard, and so on. So what I encourage you to do, whether you're a student or you're an instructor already, is to take this information and decide which are the activities that I'm going to try to boost in my setting. Maybe it's just in my family. Maybe it's in a particular class like social policy. If you're taking the class with a lot of people who are direct practitioner training people, maybe then turn them on to some of these easier ways to get involved and have them understand the power of advocacy. I'm kind of preaching now, but this is really important to me. Ariel Beisel is alerting us to some websites, including Speak's website, and that we have so many resources there. I would be remiss not to do a little ad for my own program. We also have interviews with macro social workers and advocates. We have we're going to have 12 by the end of the semester, but these are interviews that one of our graduate students has put together, and she does a great job. And you can go to our YouTube page and listen to these current advocates and macro practitioners about what their jobs are like and how they got into the field. So let me just summarize. First, engagement is vital, and engagement is part of social work's DNA. And social workers need to know how to do this. More than ever, we need to be active. The second key point is that we need to assess why things aren't being done. I don't have time. I'm not comfortable with it. I don't know where to start. Each one of those is a valid reason that we can overcome with a targeted intervention. And that's the third point, is that we can do something about the areas where there are low rates of involvement or engagement. So that's the key message that I want to leave with you all. Here we go. Fellow students in my school are trying to start a voting and social work chapter. However, other students don't seem to be interested. Yes, I can certainly understand that. It's hard to get people to do things, and it's everything that we do as macro social workers involves persuasion. So I would just say I haven't. This isn't part of this presentation, but there's a lot of good work about how to be more persuasive, how to get people involved in social work macro activity. It's definitely going to impact their career. Even if you think, oh, I'm going to just open up my own private practice. Well, there's lots of laws and regulations about that. How much are you going to get paid that's a policy. I think that one key thing is to show people how this kind of social work impacts them and how they will be a better social worker and have more ability to help more people, even if they're at the most direct practice level, if they're also advocates. One of the things that comes over again and again through our interviews is that NASW is a key resource for people to get involved, and that you can get involved even like if you work for Child Protective Services and you're in NASW, there's a committee that helps create the regulations and the laws that govern your work and how you can help children, and importantly, how many social workers there are in the CPS. So the key point here is to tie advocacy work to their personal goals and their values. So that's a summary. And the end point here is no matter what we do, the work continues. We're never going to reach utopia. At least I don't feel like I'm ever going to reach utopia. I hope that you all get closer than I will. But the work continues, and we need to help each other along the way. We need to be there for each other because this is hard work. But we need to create community as well as we do the work. None of us needs to be the only one. And when we get tired, we need to have trained other people to help that work continue. So on behalf of Speak, once again, I want to acknowledge the financial support of the Simmons Sisters Fund at Texas Women's Foundation here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Without them, Speak would not exist, quite literally. And I want to just say again, I'm the director, but I have two staff people who do the bulk of the work and do a great job. And without them, it would be impossible to achieve very much. One of them is Jessica Leach, who's an MSW, who is the coordinator of the program. And the other person is Ariel Beisel, who I know is on this call. And she is a communication specialist. And now, if you go to our website, if you go to our YouTube page, if you go to our Instagram, if you go to our LinkedIn page, she's in charge of all of those things. So please check out those websites that we have, those connections that we have. Get on our mailing list, like, subscribe, all those things that they say. And I'm just look through the questions. If you have any questions, please write them in there. To bring your staff people into the session. I would love to, if only I knew how. Speak only started a year ago, so it's not such a surprise that you might not have heard of it.
If there are his staff members on this call and within the chat, you can share your screen and audio in the upper right-hand corner of the screen that you all see, and that should bring you within the screen for everybody else to see.
Okay. Ariel, do you feel comfortable? Maybe I should stop sharing my screen. Oh, there's Ariel.
Hi, everybody.
And Ariel is the genius behind all of our communications, and it's wonderful. I'm so glad that you're here.
Thanks, everybody, for your support.
Okay, I'm trying to stop sharing. So, well, anyway, Charles, thanks for that advice.
If you click the little TV icon down on the bottom bar, that should stop sharing. Perfect.
These things are not difficult, but they are you have to know where to click. So
absolutely, no worries.
Yeah. Well, we've gotten great support from the organizers here, and Charles, I think it's wonderful that you're listening in, and thank you so much for organizing this. I listened into Shannon's talk, Shannon Lane, and it was inspiring as always.
All right. Thank you so much, Rick, for coming today and speaking to us. For all of the attendees in the chat and within watching, we have some really great sessions coming up for the 2 to 3 sessions. So feel free to go to the next one, or if you have more questions for Rick, please feel free to stay on and ask those.
Yeah, I'll stay on for a few more minutes, and then if you have it, just post it. Thank you all for being here. I've really enjoyed putting this together. As I say, it's the first time this has ever been presented anywhere, and it's kind of fun to talk about it. So thanks. No, you're all very welcome. Well, feel free to contact me through Speak. You can go to the website. You can find my email address at University of Texas at Arlington. It's fairly easy. It's rhoefer@uta.edu. And I look forward to hearing from you. And if you're watching this on the replay, you're every bit as welcome to contact me, because I watch so many things on replay, and that's how I make my connections. So take care, everyone. It's been a pleasure.